In today's video we are going to learn to replace this broken door with the new door in a few steps I'm gonna walk you through. Hey, this is Marco from Handyman Solutions. Let's jump into it. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna dismount that broken door, and then we're gonna first dry fit the door. After we dry fitted the door, we may have to cut it a little bit on the bottom and on the side. Then we will transpose those hinges to the new door, because they don't come with the routed slots for the hinges. After that, we're gonna drill the hole for the knob, because we want to adjust the door to the current setting. The same thing, we want to adjust the hinge height on the new door to the current settings. We want to reuse where the hinges are located, because they're already routed out, so we don't want to move those, but we're gonna replace those hinges with new ones. Same we're gonna do with the hardware. Alright, let's go and remove that door. So first we're gonna remove the pin, and we can just go with the screwdriver and pry the pin upwards. And then I can hold the door with one hand and release the upper pin, and now the door just should come off the hinges. Here we go. And that's it for the first task. Alright, so I put in the new door, just sitting there, it's not attached to anything. And first thing I want to do is I want to determine the upper gap, then the gaps on the side, because we need some, there needs to be a gap so it can be open and close. I go all the way around and just determine where do we have any gaps, just to make sure I have enough room to door to fit in the opening. So because this is a hardwood floor, I'm gonna go and cut off about 1/2 inch on the bottom of this door. This gives me a little bit more workability, because not always the wood is surface is very even. So we want to make sure we always have a sufficient gap so the door can move, open and close freely. Okay, so I already noticed that. And then what I'm usually do is I'm getting a shim on the bottom and move the door as much up as possible, and then I will transform the hinge where the hinges are located over to the door. So let me get the shim, and then we go from there. So as we can see, we have here a smaller gap than we have over here, and this is not really a big problem. It is just more aesthetic problem, at least for now. And I think the gap here is about 1/8 of an inch up here, and I think that's sufficient. And if I press that back here a little bit, because the door will then hang on this side, we got here about 1/16 and a little bit more on the bottom, probably also 1/8. And of course we will cut off 1/2 inch on the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I want to have those hinges on the same place where they are right now. So I just mark on the door where I have to route out the hinge, and then I remove the door, and then we use the jig and the router to route it out. I forgot to say we can also already remove the hinges because we're gonna replace them with the new ones. So I'm gonna remove them and then we're gonna go and work on the door. Okay, so we got our door on the bottom and we have our marks where we're gonna put the hinge. This is on the top side, and I made a little jig with the 3D printer, but of course you can buy a jig at the hardware store to do those to route out those hinges. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm just gonna place my template on here, and then I get the router bit which has a bearing on it, right? And then just demonstrate that here quickly. The bearing will then ride along the template and basically cut out the materials where then the hinge will sit, okay? So I'll do the setup and then we start routing. So that's how I set up the template. I just clamp it. I also have the option where I could screw it to the door, but I think the clamp works basically pretty much the same. And next thing I'm going to do is I had to adjust the depth of the bit to the thickness of the hinge. So we only want to route out that then the hinge is flush with the surface. All right. So that's how about it looks like. We have to do some cleanup. My jig is not 100% perfect. We have to get rid of those noses here. But for that I just use a chisel. And as I said, if you buy that jig from the hardware store, you most likely this jig will take care of that little nose here. I just have to improv. Just came up with a different solution. Here we go. Just cleaning that up nicely. And then the hinge should fit in here perfectly. See, as you can see, we have the correct depth. It's nice and flush. So I would say that's a success for the first hinge. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang the door, and then we're gonna see where we need to make some adjustments. Alright, so we put up the door, and I had to loosen the door stop a little bit on the bottom. So now we can close it. And then exactly happened what I thought, that this gap up here is a little bit, there is no gap anymore, so we have the door will not close, whereas in the bottom we have now that 1/8 of an inch of space. So what we can do now is, because we have to cut it on the bottom anyway, we will take off some materials here in that area as well. I'm going to do here is because we have the striker plate is already installed, so what I'm going to do is I want to determine the middle of that plate, then I transfer that middle to my door, so when I then drill the hole for the knob, the lock engages in the current setup. Okay, so as we can see here, go a little bit lower, so here we just really have a hair of a gap. That's why I'm gonna cut also a little bit on the bottom, because of the season change. You never know, better be safe than sorry. Okay. Yes, I agree, we are outside and this is definitely not the preferred setup. However, I do not have my track here for the track, so I have to find another solution, and I'm using a thin piece as a guide, and then, as we were talking about, inside I have to trim the door in width about 1/8 of an inch, and that's what I'm going to do now. And then we cut on the bottom, on this side, sorry, also 1/2 inch off to get more clearance. There we go. Get that piece cut off. Looks pretty good to me. All right, we are back inside with our door. We're gonna mount them quickly. So now we should have enough clearance here, which we do have. Maybe a little bit too much, but as I said, this may settle or moves or whatever. So we have at least now big enough gap on the bottom as well as on the top. So the next thing we're going to do is we're gonna drill the hole. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we got here again a special tool or a template where we can drill the hole for the knob and for the latch. And but basically we're gonna screw that on here, and we drill from this side and that side in here, and then we have the setup. But first we have to center that piece because it is wider than the door itself, so we have to center it to the door thickness. And then there are also two different setup for the knob. One is further away from the edge of the door, so we have to make sure, I'm not sure if you can see it, but here is a 2.375, or here is 2.75. So this is, have to make sure that both of those, they are interchangeable, are the correct side, otherwise the hole will not match up. Okay, so and we want to go closer to the edge of the door, so that's why we already have the setup. It's already correct. And first I'm gonna draw that line over here. Then I'm gonna mark the center just quickly. Okay, then we draw that line as good as we can. Here we go. So this is the center, right? So we're gonna double check that should work. Okay, so we're gonna center that tool here as good as we can, as well horizontal and just as good as we can. Now what we're going to do is we're gonna drill first those 2 holes, start from this side, and then once the pilot drill comes through here, I'm gonna go to this side and start drilling from here, because we don't want to tear out. So next we drill that hole. Next we're gonna use that smaller size diameter, and I figured out that this tool is easier to use if we just don't use the pilot, and then we just go in here and then we start get the vacuum again. Well, maybe. Right, so we got our hole. To me it looks pretty much in the center, right? So clean that up here, and then we get the lock set. Okay, we got our lock here, and we are pretty much very close to the end. So all we do is we feed that in here. Then we install the handle. Here we go. As you can see, it fits perfectly. The only thing we need to do is we need to route out here in that area. So I already mark it. But for that I also have a template, but we're gonna do that a little bit later. But for now the door is set up. I'm pretty happy with it, and of course it needs paint and we have to smoothen the edges, but for today we are good.